Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you're joining us from. I'm Ira Feldman, the MEPTEC Executive Director, and I would like to welcome you to today's MEPTEC IMAPS Semiconductor Industry Speakers Series webinar. In terms of MEPTEC, we are a membership-supported organization. Renewals will be going out next month in December, but please consider joining as a member if you have not, or your company can also join. We have multiple levels. If you have questions about joining, please reach out to Betty Cooper. It's the membership and sponsorships that support events like this and enable us to make these free of charge for everyone. So please consider supporting us if you haven't already done so. And with that, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's Semiconductor Industry Speaker Series. Roger Grace of Roger Grace Associates is going to present how is industry uncertainty impacting MEMS commercialization, results of the annual MEMS Industry Commercialization Report Card Study. I've had the pleasure of knowing Roger for many years. I think he's very well known throughout the industry and well respected. He's been running Roger Grace Associates for 4 decades now. It's a marketing consultancy focused on market research, market communications, and sales channel development. He's been very involved throughout the years on MEMS and sensors. And with that, we welcome Roger.
Thank you, Ira. Ira's been very helpful in navigating all of the complexities of the world here for me. But most importantly, I want to share with all of you that it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you today. And I would like to thank my long-term friend and colleague, Ira Feldman, for extending the invitation to me to make this presentation. I have spoken at numerous MEPTEC events in the past. The last one was a live one in San Jose. I'm sure Ira was there with me, but this is a real pleasure to come back and be able to address the MEPTEC organization. And it's been a major favorite of mine and my clients for many years. And also we've made numerous contributions to the MEPTEC report. I also will be submitting an article to the MEPTEC report on this topic, and you're welcome to look into it to supplement the information I'm going to give you. Now, you're going to find this presentation to be, as my good friends say, text rich. And I call it too many notes Roger, as in too many notes Mozart. And there's lots of words. And the reason why there are lots of words, it's my belief that this document, and it's my purpose that this document will end up being somewhat of a book and a reference to you, and we'll have lots of information, and you won't have to remember what I said when I showed a picture of ABCXYZ, but in fact, the words are there to explain it. So that's the reason for the text-rich presentation. So that's kind of the introduction. So let's get started. So Ira was kind enough to put the information together about my organization. And as he said, I've been in business for 40 years. I deal primarily in the MEMS, nano, and sensors area. And I work in strategic communications and custom market research. Lots of words there, but the most important thing is I'm an engineer, a master's as a Raytheon graduate fellow from Northeastern, BS, MSEE, and also decided to cross over and become a marketing guy and did my time over at UC Berkeley MBA program. The most important thing, however, is not my education, but what I've been doing, what organizations I've helped support, and how the report card and other things that I do have been major advocates for the MEMS industry over all these years. Outline of the presentation, there's going to be 30-something slides here, so I'm going to go rather rapidly because we want to have sufficient time at the end so that you can ask questions, which hopefully you'll have lots of. But the thing that's going to be really important here is I don't want to spend a lot of time on the report card per se and the grades. I think that the grades this year especially are so incredibly different. And that's what makes this year's report card so important, because the report card has really hit it out of the ballpark, or as we say in Boston, hit it over the green monster, and has really called out some of the major issues like supply chain and marketing challenges. And those are the things we're going to spend time on. And more importantly, not just the report card, but the verbatims that the report card participants provided, as well as the analysis that I've done and the recommendations that I'm giving to my clients based on the study that I've done and the follow-up interviews that were conducted. So what's the premise of the report card? And I'm sure everybody's heard this. And if you haven't, here you go. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And the name of the game is you got to measure it. And how do you measure it? Well, there are lots of ways of measuring things. You know, you can get a spectroscopy system. You can get all kinds of great measurement systems. But here, in a more social mechanism, we need to go out and use market studies and opinion surveys. And that's what the report card is. It is a classic opinion survey. And we'll talk more about opinion surveys. I'm going to use the word commercialization. And when I use the word commercialization, I mean this. I mean this process by which you see the definition down there, process a cycle of introducing a new product or production method to the marketplace. And I put this commercialization process model together in conjunction with at least a dozen of my colleagues in the MEMS and sensors industry to be able to capture all of the elements that need to go into the process to come up with a product. And the things that are in red are the things that my organization supports clients to do. So we're going to start off with barriers to commercialization, and you know, we need to overcome barriers. The name of the game here is, why do we have the report card? Because I made an analysis to determine there were a whole bunch of things that were holding back the MEMS industry. And then I decided to do a lot of research and find out what were the criteria that were adopted by other technologies to determine commercialization success. So after I did that, I looked into the MEMS industry specifically and tried to analyze why things were the way they were. And the thing that's really interesting here is that, and you'll see this in my article, that the MEMS, the total sales of MEMS is about $43 billion. And the semiconductor industry, IC industry, is 35 times that size. And the thing that's really challenging here is the MEMS industry has been around for about 10 years or less from the introduction of the semiconductor concept. So they're both the same age. They're over 50 years old, but there's a lot of problems with the MEMS industry, and the report card is an attempt to find out what those problems are and to report back to the people in the industry how to overcome those problems. My dear friend and colleague, Steve Walsh, some of you may know Steve, and I put together this timetable. And what Steve and I did is we went into the literature and looked at articles and looked at patent filings and tracked all of these 14 MEMS devices, you know, like a gas sensor or a pressure sensor or an accelerometer or a gyro, and looked at them and tried to assess how long each one of them took to transport itself from one level of the product development cycle to full commercialization. The bottom line here is that the median number is about 30 years. That's a long time. That's a long time to go from first discovery to many people providing this technology in large volumes. So the question is, there's got to be a lot of barriers in there specific to each phase. How do you overcome those barriers? The report card is an attempt to discuss this. This is the product life cycle for sensors and in general. And you can see, if you look at MEMS, the second one, it's a follow-up of the discrete mechanical platform, which is now, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, especially if you look at the results of the last half a dozen or so report cards, we're in a somewhat mature phase 3 maturity. And I'm feeling that right now we're pretty getting close to the peak of the maturity, and what we're seeing are incremental enhancements of the technology and new applications, new technologies that are coming about to supplement MEMS and silicon in the designer's toolkits are printed flexible sensors that are made on printed and flexible substrates and functional fabrics. And I've been writing about this, and we'll be doing an all-day conference at Sensors Expo, Sensors Converge in late July. They have about a dozen speakers talk about that technology. Does this report card matter? Well, I'd like to think so, because I put a lot of time into it over the last dozen or so years. And as I mentioned several times in the past, the name of the game here is to try to come up with an assessment of in kind of a quantitative versus qualitative perspective of how we're moving forward in commercialization success based on these 14 critical success factors, which I researched to determine their high level of correlation in determining outcomes. And then the thing that was really interesting this year, because of COVID, I ended up, when I went out to my colleagues, 42 of whom were kind enough to help us here, to ask them specific questions about the impact of COVID on their grade that they gave me. And you're going to see a number of these things talked about later. The methodology that we use here is popular to those in the market research area, which I play in, and it's called the Delphi or mass observation. I coined the term a hybrid Delphi mass observation because it ties in the bases of Delphi, which means a limited number of people asked of experts, and mass observation, going out and having personal interactions with them to get answers. And unlike, and we've seen this in the elections over the past week of people doing projections and things and of that sort, these are not projectionable, if that's a word, outcomes. These are independent, small number, 42 completed questionnaires, but more importantly, the number of years of the people who participated is over 1,000 of experience in the MEMS industry. And that's pretty impressive. And we've got some very important people that support this program. And the other thing is, they come from a broad selection of interviewees. We're not just talking about companies that are making devices. We're talking about people that are using them. We are talking about people that are providing tools like Applied Materials and EVG and others to help make these products. And then not a lot of academics, only a couple, but that's the way we put this together. And we had an incentive of a randomly drawn $100 Amazon gift card. This is not an eye test. This is not an eye test. But the thing that's really important, and I want to bring this to your attention immediately, is when you look at the last column, the delta column, with rare exception like industry roadmap where there was no change, every one of the 14 grades went down by 1, and the established infrastructure, which included supply chain, went down by 2. That's the first thing that I wanted to point out here. And then secondly, it's interesting to see if you look at the overall grade, and this comes out from what I said earlier about the maturity and the non-dynamic market of MEMS right now. You can see that starting in 2010, the grade was B minus, and then B minus, B minus, B minus, then it went up to B, and then more B minuses, and all of a sudden a C plus. Something happened, and that's why this year's report card is so important. Now, here's a summary of what I've just said. And COVID very much had an influence on these grades. I received over 125 verbatims. I won't bore you with all of them. I'll bore you with a lot of them. And 65 of them are noted in this final report that I'm presenting today. And the ones that I think are important are in the 65 I've highlighted in red. So you can see there was a market drop-off in 2021. So here is going to be a format of the several following slides. And I'm going to bring your attention just to the ones in red. You have all the other ones if you're interested in hearing more about them. You can always contact me via email, and you have that. But I think this is my buddy Andy Oliver at the University of Montana. People do not want to buy a MEMS. Customers want to buy a device that does a specific function. I've been saying this for a very, very long time. Probably Andy was influenced by what I've said, but as a previous design engineer and as a marketing person, the name of the game is you have a functional block diagram of a product. You have all these elements in a functional block diagram. The question is, what do we use to optimally satisfy the requirements of, say, power, price, size, performance, all these criteria that are imposed on a function in a system? What solution optimizes that function? So that's what Andy has to say about there. The other thing is the novelty of MEMS is gone. Well, I've been doing MEMS for 40 years, 40. Honest to goodness, I started as a teenager, but not true. But there are people like Janusz Brzyk, God rest his soul, who passed away last Friday, and we're having a memorial service for him on Saturday, who's been in this business for longer than myself. And Kurt Peterson, another famous guy. This has been around for a long time. It's not a novelty anymore. It's a reality. But then there are still people that don't understand the real benefit of MEMS, and that's why the continuation of myself and Janusz and Kurt need to be paid attention to, because we're trying to proselytize this technology because it is really an important technology and is the basis of many, many things, including your cell phone. And there are about 20 of these MEMS devices in the most recently developed iPhone. Marketing, well, I'm a marketing guy, and I saw a significant change here and some very interesting verbatims. And the last verbatim is, and these are very highly correlative. And you look at the first one, restrictions to traveling, more web-based communication, less visits and fairs and exhibits. That is so true. And I know that we haven't had a MEPTEC in-person event, and I'm looking and encouraging Ira to do that. And what we're seeing, however, and this is coming out of my article, that we're starting to see, like at Census Converge, where I participate and have done so for over 30 years, the people coming back to exhibit, the people coming back to attend. But what's happened as a result of all this is we now have a new tool in the marketer's toolbox, and we're experiencing this live at this moment in time, and it's called a webinar. So what we're seeing here is some good things have happened, some bad things, and now we're finding new tools, and that is, as I've mentioned, a hybrid approach. And then we're also seeing more people jumping on planes and going and visiting clients, and salespeople and business development people love to do this. And I think that now that people are coming back to that, we're starting to gradually get back to what I call the new normal. R&D. Lots of things have happened in R&D. One of the biggest things that have happened in R&D is a lot of people couldn't work in laboratories. A lot of laboratories were shut down. It's one thing to do marketing virtually, but trying to develop a product without a clean room, that's a challenge. Another thing that happened is because of the travel restrictions, a lot of graduate students are overseas students, and those people couldn't come to Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, wherever the research lab was to support the R&D activities, to support their thesis and the different activities in their universities. So this is also something that's happened in terms of the R&D budgets. A lot of people have reduced R&D budgets because of the uncertainty, keyword in the title, the uncertainty of how things are moving forward, and they're holding back before, especially in the last couple months here, putting their budgets in for next year. How are they going to staff their R&D organizations? Venture capital attraction. The first one, again, thank you, Janusz Brzyk. Janusz started 12 different MEMS startups. This one, his most recent, and they just got a 220 million Series C infusion for their piezo-resistive sensing technology that's being used in ultrasound imaging. So the bottom line is that VC attraction has gone down, but lots of VC companies have been looking at opportunities, and those opportunities have been in the healthcare area. And I've seen several of my colleagues do very, very well, whether they be developing products that go into healthcare and other kinds of associated get better programs driven by the COVID vaccine issues. Profitability. Well, couple of things, the good news and the bad news. When people aren't on airplanes, they don't have to pay for an airline ticket. And when they're not eating meals on the road and staying at the Marriott or Hilton, they don't have to pay those fees. And that money was saved and therefore went to the bottom line. But the biggest problem on the other side is that, and driven by supply chain, several of my friends have told me what kinds of increases their bill of materials have suffered as a result of this, and that was eating away at the profitability of the technology. So right now, and you look at the last one, difficult to determine if pricing increases are a result of economic uncertainty or whatever, but the fact of the matter is the BOMs have gone up dramatically, and they've been reflected in the end prices of the devices that are being developed. Interesting thing on employment, a lot of this came from Jason Weigold at MEMS staff, and he's very upbeat because he's a very upbeat guy, and there are several statements that he's made here, and one of them he's seeing is that these companies like Apple and Google and Meta are hiring MEMS people, and I've got several of my friends that have worked for places like Analog Devices or ST, major MEMS players, and they're moving to Apple and Google and Meta and getting gigantic amounts of money and VC infused opportunities in these new jobs. And also down at the bottom, MEMS engineers are getting promoted more, and that's as a result of the business growing. Here's the one that was really hit the hardest, and established infrastructure. And I'll give you a little vignette. You can read along here, but I'm going to give you the vignette, a supply chain, especially from China. One of my colleagues at a company that makes develops MEMS devices needs a certain kind of mask chemical for their lithographic process. That material, that liquid, comes in a plastic bottle. The people that make them the liquid are having a problem with the plastic bottles that come from China, and therefore can't deliver the chemicals to my friend's fab. So you can see how substantial supply chain issues can be, all the way down into plastic bottles for chemicals. This is a very important slide. I know that you're all wanted me to kind of cut to the chase, and here it is. Lots of verbatims. I've quoted numerous ones. But the thing that's really, really important here is, will be seen in the next couple of slides, and that is, there are ways to get around these problems. And that's one of the most important things that we have to deliver here in the next 15 minutes or so. And that is how to overcome these problems, how to convert a challenge into an opportunity. Well, here are some of the situations. We still need to do a job that I've been talking about for many, many years. We need to continue to, excuse me, create a significant awareness as to the unique benefits that MEMS, introduction of MEMS into systems provide. And for people that are in the device business, which are typically the people that I work with, they need to help differentiate their products that are MEMS-based, driven by the inherent attributes of MEMS. I think that what we're going to see here in 2022 report card is probably more of the same. And we'll find that out in Q2 next year. But I think because of the continuation of COVID Omicron, BA4 and BA5, plus other things, exacerbated by what's happening in the economic slowdown that we're seeing worldwide, we're going to see similar C+ grades, if not even less than that next year. The people in this business need to be more marketing and applications pull versus technology pull strategy oriented, and in line with all of the stuff that Ira and his colleagues at MEPTEC are talking about. Packaging is really important. It's not about just the device in the wafer. It's all about how the devices, how the wafer and the devices get packaged after all of that semiconductor processing goes down, whether it's in flip chip packaging or discrete packaging. But packaging continues to be a challenge from price and performance under a significant environmental constraints. And VC funding will continue to be a challenge in non-medical areas. But the name of the game here, and I go back to Janusz again, was when Janusz and his team put ECHO together. They weren't a center company. They were a solution company. They are making an integrated product, a totally self-contained, handheld ultrasound imaging system, not a device. That's the reason for the $220 million ground C investment, because they weren't making devices. What are the lessons learned and the strategies to be adopted moving forward? I've looked at the two most significantly impacted ones, and they are marketing and infrastructure. And I think the big thing here, and I'm seeing this happening with me and my clients, is the rise in the value of things like YouTube. And back to Ira's comment about this presentation being available on YouTube. Constant contact and other direct mail programs, LinkedIn, websites. These are the tools that the marketing teams need to adopt. But the thing that's really going to be important here is that people need to look at what happened in 2021 and 2022 and make a critical assessment of the ROIs of the strategies and tactics embraced during the pandemic, knowing that these things, pardon me for reading this because this is a powerful statement, knowing that these things will never get back to pre-pandemic. And we need to adapt and adopt a new normal and continue to do what works. But most importantly, and I've seen this in many of the webinars, marketing webinars that I've done, marketers need to go in and look at what they did in the past 12 months and learn from the outcomes, what level of positivity or negativity resulted, and then continue to do what works and modify what didn't work as well and eliminate the things that didn't work. And then finally, the final statement here is, like any plan, they need to be viewed as living, breathing, and highly malleable vehicles that need to be changed in a timely fashion to accommodate the quickly changing industry dynamics. In other words, you got to be flexible. You got to be able to move at a moment's notice to take advantage of opportunities. From an infrastructure point of view, these are some of the items that came out based on personal interviews with various people. And some of them might be some that you've already adopted yourself. But the name of the game is what possible alternative materials and system resource capabilities are within your supply chain. Develop new supply chain players. Prioritize purchasing from local sources and minimize purchasing from non-favorable, from let's say a political point of view sources, and also develop flexible designs. Several of the people that I talked to that were device suppliers basically made their design flexible, that they could use several alternative approaches to come up with the same, say, transfer function of the device or the product that they were making by just swapping out some components that were more readily available to them. And the other one from a tool supplier, they're bringing in-house and developing technologies to be more vertically integrated and less dependent on outside suppliers. I chatted with one of these guys last night, and he was bemoaning the fact that he's got to wait 26 months for a vacuum pump for his tool. So, what are the alternatives? So you got to do that. And that's kind of the last one. And they're trying to do this. They're trying to proactively partner with key suppliers to make sure they get priorities in what they're doing. But the good news, I like to end things with the good news. And here are some of my most favorite sayings, taken all the way from Wolfgang von Goethe, a German philosopher. That which does not kill you makes you stronger. Being a cancer survivor, it's my mantra. And 20 years ago, I had cancer, and I'm here talking to you today. And that which did not kill me made me stronger. And then, in memoriam to my dear friend Janusz Brzyk, these are not challenges, but opportunities to be taken advantage of and made to create positive outcomes. And then over a little lunch last week with a winemaker, the grapevine stressed during its growth cycle, the finer the wine it will produce. Jim Winsler of Winsler Vineyards in Portland. And then finally, one of my favorites, Commander David Farragut, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, Battle of Mobile Bay in the Civil War. And I'd like to leave you with good news. So those are references, not important to talk about. But for more information, this will be published. The upcoming MEPTEC report will be published in a couple of weeks, I think. And final comment, thank you very much for your patience. And I trust that some of this information may be of use to you in navigating all of the landmines that are out there in the technology and business world today, especially in light of the ongoing issues with the highly acknowledged situation of a softening economy and the challenges to continue to do business in the near future. So thank you all. Thank you, Ira. We're ready for questions.
Thank you, Roger. I've also launched a poll so you can give Roger some feedback talking about measurements. We certainly appreciate your feedback. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A tool. Let me start with actually a specific question that really stood out to me. The industry roadmap has had a C grade for years. You know, who should own that, or I mean, what would it take to move that in a meaningful way? And I want to balance it with your comment about, you know, Janusz getting funding for a product and not a MEMS sensor. So should these be product roadmaps, or do we still need a MEMS roadmap for the industry?
There's like 5 questions there, Ira, but what I wouldn't expect anything less from you all these years. So I will do my very best to answer these, but I'll start off with the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart, and that is Janusz Brzyk. And that is that, you know, Janusz and I have worked together for 40 years. And up until a.k.a, which has been around for like 5 or 6 years, Janusz has been a device guy. And what I mean by a device guy, you know, at Nova Sensor, where I was on the founding team, we developed pressure sensors primarily, and we did some accelerometers, but the majority of the work was done there. At IC Sensors, prior to Nova Sensor, devices. At LV Sensors, he started moving away specifically from devices, and he started going higher levels of integration and did tire pressure monitoring devices, which, as people know, need several things like a battery, an accelerometer, and a tire pressure monitor, as well as a very, 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 to your area of expertise, Ira, packaging, so that it will be able to survive and not cost a lot of money. So as you can see, Janusz over the years was kind of getting into the idea of integration, and then along comes Sandeep, who's his current partner and the CEO of a.k.a, and Sandeep is basically pushing even harder into integration, and based on a lot of market research that was conducted, came to the conclusion that even though they had a proprietary piezoelectric technology, that they realized that they couldn't get the funding that they wanted based on conversations with lots of venture capitalists on just the device. People didn't want to just fund devices. They wanted to add value. They wanted to be able to create product differentiation. And a lot of these words were used in my previous slides, you know, creating product differentiating, adding value, adding content, adding profit margin, because being in the device business right now is a very, very, very low profit margin business. But being in the systems business driven by sensors gets to give you more profit. Now, to answer another, hopefully that answers one question. To answer another question is, I think we are all, including me, guilty of why things haven't moved forward. And I think it's the adoption rate. The people in the MEMS industry, and I've been around for a long time and have a lot of friends there, tend to be, with all due respect to we engineers, and I know Ira's an engineer and I'm an engineer, engineers are risk-averse people. We typically don't go forward and put our butts on the line and do things that are really challenging and could basically end up in putting our heads on the chopping block. That's why things take so long to develop, because there aren't a lot of people that are willing to take the plunge and be innovative and swim against the tide, or swim against the stream. So I'd say one of the things people need to have more faith in the fact that things can be done. We're gradually, I think we've come to a point where you're not going to see too many more increases in grades. I think we're in kind of a quiescent mode, with the exception of grades going even further down because of worsening socioeconomic and political conditions around the world. So I think it's going to be a real challenge, but the real opportunities, I think, are targeted opportunities. There are lots of companies that I'm working with right now with unique solutions, and I think it all comes down to the creativity of the people on this phone call or this webinar, and the people that attend different conferences, and their willingness to take chances and start out over uncharted waters and put their necks out there and try to develop new solutions. And the key word is solution, not product. People want solutions, like Andy Oliver said, not a MEMS. They want a solution or a function. The higher the integration level, the better off everybody would be. Well, that was a 4-part question. Those are 2. What were the other ones?
Well, I mean, it's, what organization, and, as you talked about the need to having solutions and products, not just the MEMS device, but so is a roadmap still critical then? Or should we be road mapping the functions needed or the products needed versus, hey, we need new accelerometers, so.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Ira, and thank you for bringing that up, because roadmap, as you may have noticed if your eyes were that tuned in, was one of the 14 critical success factors. And I've been involved with Steve Walsh and others, and that's where that product life cycle, or that's where the product development timetable came. MANCEF, the Micro and Nanotechnology Commercialization Education Foundation, which Steve and I founded 20 plus years ago, produced a roadmap. And it's a 20-year-old roadmap. Some people are still using it, but it's really, really out of date. I am a major proponent of roadmaps. I've also co-authored an article on roadmaps, and if you want to get a copy of it, send me your email. But I'm a major proponent. I think roadmaps are important, and organizations like SEMI are major players. I don't know about MEPTEC and IMAPS, but I think industry associations really are where roadmaps need to come from, because they have a whole bunch of dedicated volunteers that want to participate and contribute. And I do believe that roadmaps can be done. I think from a device point of view, trying to make incremental enhancements of existing technologies that are in the mature stage, and you saw those 14 different product life cycle slides, is not really where the effort should go. I think the roadmaps that need to be developed are for let's say, emerging technologies. I think emerging technologies need a lot more direction than the more mature ones. So the emerging technologies that I showed earlier in product life cycles, which were printed flexible and functional fabric, really need to happen. And companies like Next, which is part of SEMI, and AFOA, Advanced Functional Fabrics of America, those are the organizations that are going to be challenged to adopt that. And I know, talking to Michelle Farrington, who spoke at my session at Sensors Converge last year, her program at AFOA is, in fact, to start creating a roadmap. So I am pro roadmap for early areas of the product life cycle, like 20 years ago in MEMS. Roadmaps were important. I think roadmaps are important from not only should start from a technology point of view before they start going into systems, because once you start getting into systems, it gets to be a little bit more complicated because of the interactions of the functionalities in the product. But sign me up for a roadmap on printed flexible sensors and functional fabrics. It's very much needed for the future success of those technologies.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering the multi-part. Let's there's a question for Brent in the Q&A, but let me, even though you touched upon part of it, he's asking, is it time for a new MEMS foundry from an existing fab space? I know there are MEMS specific fabs, but he's also asking, do you think it's likely that the semiconductor manufacturers are going to, accelerate building more MEMS devices as part of their strategies to become more integrated?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that question's been around. Ira, you can attest to this for as long as you and I have been drinking wine together, which has been a long time.
Yeah.
And my feel on this, and I've done several market studies on the concept of foundries. The bottom line is nobody is going to get funded by a VC if, as part of their plan, is to include brick and mortar foundry, semiconductor manufacturing. There are so many foundries out there, and more coming on board. Some of them in China, and my friend Doug Spark knows all about this. That there appears to be a sufficient amount, and based on the study that I just conducted, and a lot of the I talked to the people at several foundries, and there seems to be room for new foundries. And the thing that we have to keep in mind is that all foundries don't have to, for MEMS, don't have the same requirements as the foundries for semis from 2 points of view. I did a big study several years ago for a company, and they were a foundry that tried to move 4-inch wafers into 8-inch wafers and do a transition. And what the outcome of I can say this because the NDA is come and gone. What it comes down to is with rare exceptions, the number of devices that a application, including even these, need are not really 12-inch wafer fab oriented and physical geometry driven. Lots of fabs are still working on 8-inch and will be working on 8-inch for MEMS for a very, very long time. And my feeling is the sweet spot, if you're going to be putting together a foundry, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to either enhance your existing 8-inch fab that is a semiconductor fab, kind of a specialty semiconductor fab, not a monster fab like TSMC or Global Foundries fab, but a specialty fab with specialty materials, like good example, Echo. There were only 2 or 3 companies in the world that Janusz and CMD told me about that could support their technology. This could be, if you want to start a fab out there, call me, we'll do it. This could be an opportunity for somebody to bring a specialty substrate fab into existence to challenge the 2 and 3 that have piezoelectric capability. So there is room for fabs, but it depends. Classic marketing statement, it depends. There has to be a niche. There has to be a very specific area. There needs to be research conducted to find out where the unfulfilled needs of the marketplace are. And I believe that there are opportunities. And, final one on that is on the other end of things. There's a company here that I met at Sensors Converge called InchFab, INCHFAB. InchFab is coming out with some technology that will be able to create MEMS solutions without spending hundreds of millions and billions of dollars on a fab. So in other words, if you've got a university that needs to have a fab to do research, you don't have to go and spend a lot of money. You can do inch fab. If you want to start off with a specialty product where it doesn't have large volumes and you don't need 8-inch wafers, companies like inch fab, and I'm sure inch fab is one of a whole bunch of companies that people don't know about, have the capability of supporting fabrication requirements, manufacturing requirements that the other big fabs don't want to deal with. And the name of the game is profitability, turnaround time, and ability to serve the customer's needs uniquely. So the bottom line is, yes, there are opportunities in the fab area, and it depends on what that fab is made up of and what their capabilities are from a processing point of view. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think it does. So great answers, and good to see that somebody's actually thinking about how to make prototypes in low volume more cost effectively and faster. So that's cool. A question from a.k.a. He thinks that Japan would likely be a key in MEMS technology. How would you see Japanese capability or possibilities for MEMS industries now and in the future?
Another great question, and the thing that's really, really interesting to me is, because I've been doing this for so long, 40 years, I've seen, with all due respect, the coming and going of the role of Japanese companies in the MEMS industry. I've seen, and I've had several of them as clients, and I just see right now, and I could be wrong because I haven't done a real in-depth study on this, that we'll call it the involvement factor. I like to create these different factors that I can put grades on. I'd say the involvement factor in Japan is not that significant. Contradictory to that, the involvement factor in China is immense. And, I go back to my buddy Doug, who works for a Chinese company, a fab. And because he spends a lot of time there, and he's on my board at MANSEF, that we are looking, and his company sponsored a MANSEF event. So we get a real sense at MANSEF as to how vibrant and energetic and committed the Chinese are to supporting the MEMS area. And the number, as we all know, the number of graduate engineers in the Chinese educational system to fulfill the needs of these businesses that quite frequently, back to my employment chart, there's not enough people to fill out all the jobs because we don't graduate enough engineers, and people like Janusz die, and who knows how long I've got. But the point is that China has got incredible resources. The federal government is putting a great deal of money into supporting all these technologies. A good company to follow is Hanking, Hanking. And I think if Japan is going to, in my opinion, become a player again, there needs to be a whole bunch more activity going on in Japan. And I'd be delighted to chat with this gentleman because I did not get a lot of support for my report card from Japanese companies. And with all due respect to Japanese companies, they tend not to be very open. I do a lot of market research in Asia. Japanese companies tend not to be very open, as I say, opening the kimono to giving you information. They tend to be very, very close to the vest. We're not going to share any information. And when people don't share information, they reduce this concept that I've talked about earlier about promoting MEMS and promoting what it can do and promoting some of the activities that are going on in Japan to support MEMS development. And the other thing about Japan, correct me if I'm wrong, the system of the economic system and the capital system there really, really doesn't support the concept of new business and venture capital. And that, as we all know, And we know from Janish's 12 startup companies, all of which were financed by VCs, that it's all about VCs. If you don't have VCs, if you don't have infusion, if you don't have all that, talk to Kurt Peterson, who is a venture capitalist right now. If you don't have all those things going on, the VCs are not going to belly up to the bar and support your business. There's going to be a whole bunch going on there for the VCs to support you, and you got to have a good story. And there aren't a lot of opportunities in Japan, as I see it, for VC involvement to support new opportunities over there. It has to come from the established infrastructure from Sony and other companies in Japan that support technology. Again, if that doesn't answer your questions, I'm happy to take them on offline. I'm very interested in hearing more about Japan.
Okay, well, and hopefully he'll reach out to you. I think we've covered a good deal of ground here. We got a number of the questions in, so I know that there may be some more questions, and I would encourage those people who want to reach out to Roger. Roger's very approachable. He doesn't bite, last time I checked. So do reach out to Roger. You got his email, rgrace@rgrace.com. Certainly he's at many of the events. Look forward to seeing more of him now that we get back to in person. But I want to thank you very much, Roger. Let me switch.
My pleasure. And one more comment. Don't forget that we have an upcoming article from me in your MEPTEC vehicle
report. Yep.
Which will come up very soon. And for people that want more information, go to that article, go to my website or call me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And by the way, I do bite because you saw me when you were the host of that lovely lunch last week with me, and I ate my luncheon, and I appreciate our friendship and our working together. So thank you for everything you've done.
Okay, well, thank you, Roger. With that, I would like to thank everybody and wish everybody a great day. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing everybody at a future MEPTEC event. Thank you.